All right, thank you guys for coming out tonight. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Stylus 2025, all the things that we've done this year, and a little bit of a look into the future on what we're planning to do in 2026. So just going to start off with a couple of numbers of how Stylus has been doing overall. So you'll see here we got 1,200 contracts on ARB1, about 17,000 on testnet, but the number of unique deployers only about 50 and 500. But I think that's okay. You know, always bootstrapping a programming language is very hard. Bootstrapping any framework's very hard. But the fact that you guys are all here today, and even those 50 builders have launched over 10 applications, is proof that quality over quantity is, you know, where we are at right now. And we hope that the quality is going to beat quantity in the long run. So even with this amount of activity, we're very happy and excited to see where Stylus is going to go into the future. And just another set of numbers kind of proves that, right? So our SDK has over 300 stars. We've funded over 25 teams. We've reviewed over 150 milestones coming out of the Stylus sprint. So we're very excited about all the stuff that you guys are putting out and all of the innovation that's been happening in Stylus over the past year. So today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we started with, like what are the bets that we put in, and why did we believe Stylus was a good bet to begin with. I'm going to talk through some of the learnings that we had this year about what were the challenges and all the hurdles that we faced, and then go into about how we were improving the developer experience as well as just generally getting more people on Stylus. And then the last bit, we'll wrap it up with what to look forward to. So first one, betting. So Arbitrum put a big bet on Stylus, which is we believe that like WASM is the future of how you're going to get more compute out of the chain. And we were not alone in this endeavor. There was many other teams that had also approached Rust and WASM ecosystems. But there was a big fundamental difference in how we did it and how these other ecosystems did it. So you'll see Near, Polkadot, Cosmos. They all offer Rust-based smart contracts, but the big difference is that all of these ecosystems didn't prioritize interoperability, right? So interoperability was a second afterthought. There is ways to do it, but it's not nice. There's a lot of overhead, and it doesn't quite work as you'd want it to. But on Arbitrum, we wanted to make sure that there was no difference between EVM and Stylus, that you could access all the liquidity, it would be the same, and when you're using Stylus, you get all of the same network effects and benefits that you would get out of building on EVM, but simply with more benefits. So our initial flywheel concept was maybe too simple, but it was, let's just invest in a bunch of Stylus applications. Many of you guys are here today. Hopefully, those applications are going to show people Stylus's superpowers and what it's really good at. We're going to use those superpowers to help improve all the tooling underneath. And as that happens, onboarding should get easier. More people come on board, and we get more teams to build. It's pretty simple. But unfortunately, nothing ever works out that way. So there's a lot of hurdles that we faced. But before we get into those, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we thought about when we were first initializing the Stylus sprint. So there were 4 areas, like starting in 2025, we had almost only about 2 or 3 teams that were legitimately building on Stylus. So there's a lot of work to be done to build out the application layer, the developer tooling, the infrastructure, the learning material, and all of these needed to be invested in kind of collectively if we wanted a chance to, in the next 1 to 2 years, actually get to a point where people understand and utilize Stylus to its best ability. So to that effect, we invested over 9 million ARB, mostly from the Stylus sprint, but also through various OCL initiatives to get the ecosystem bootstrapped and going. So I'm going to just quickly talk through each of these investment areas, kind of what our goals were with them, and give you some examples of some of the teams that are coming out of those areas as well. So first off is obviously the most important, the application layer. So we really wanted to make sure that Stylus had a place where user-facing apps could experience the benefits of Stylus, right? Whether this is funding like DeFi primitives, privacy layers, consumer teams, anyone that's using advanced cryptography, we wanted to make sure that people that were going to experience Stylus were doing it in a way where they were experiencing things that simply could not be built on EVM. And that was really the focus. And out of that, we have some of these guys here today, but and I'm sure you'll hear from them on other talks, but Fiat Protocol, Fairblock, Superposition, 9Lives, all of these programs are using Stylus in ways that they simply couldn't in the EVM. And we're very proud to have them here and also have many of them launching. I just heard 9Lives did 4x volume yesterday, so I mean, fantastic, and congratulations to you guys. And then next up, we have developer tooling. So developer tooling goal really is to help those people, the application layer, build faster, build better, and let other people follow in their footsteps and have an easier time than they did doing it. If you talk to Alex or anyone else that was building early, they had to do a ton of work, a ton of workarounds to build custom things that, ideally other people wouldn't have to. But they put in that work, and getting that work to make sure that others don't have to was one of the main goals of investing in developer tooling and making sure that the experience only gets simpler over time. And so some of the teams here, and there was a lot, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over a few. But on the left-hand side, you'll see the Walnut debugger. They put in a ton of work into improving the debugging experience locally. They created a net new tool that plugs into our Cargo Stylus tooling that gives you a much better view and ability to debug your contracts than we could as first-party maintainers of the SDK. And then on the other side, we have something more oriented towards beginners, people that are getting exposed to Stylus for the first time via Third Web. Third Web created several templates for us that you can go to their website and deploy Stylus without ever knowing anything about Stylus. They are putting in docs to expose other Solidity developers to understanding what Stylus could be used for, and building out net new cases where Stylus is a clear winner, especially so that one of the things you'll see coming out is that they're doing a ZK airdrop module that you'll be able to slot into other types of applications. So we have the gamut here. So some developer tooling servicing the very hardcore user developer, as well as ones that are surfacing just people that are getting to start out. But at the end of the day, people will start to hear Stylus more and more and have different ways of interacting with it. And then next up is our learning. I'm sure everyone here has obviously read a lot of docs and understood Stylus, maybe even read a lot of source code to figure out what to do. But one of the biggest pain points is obviously introducing Stylus and getting people to understand and learn more about it. Most developers, when they first look at it, they don't fully understand exactly what's possible. They don't understand exactly where it's going to be better. And all of the learning and investment we want to put in there is to really showcase, what's possible, so that they're interested in learning more and getting deeper and being able to build alongside the community. And some of the places that we're investing in, Stylus Support is here. They're doing a Solana to Stylus guide. So if anyone knows a little bit of Solana, they should have an easy time following their guides to be able to build on Stylus. We have LearnWeb3, who it's a fully open source learning platform that built several modules up to getting you to build a full AMM in Stylus. So they're taking you really 0 to 1 in terms of going from knowing nothing to building a relatively complex application. And we also have things like Speedrun Stylus, which is like gives you templates off the shelf meant for hackathons, getting you up and running and building on Stylus as quickly as possible, while giving you all of the learning along the way to make sure you understand what's happening. And then we have infrastructure. So infrastructure is really to increase the support and speed at which other apps can build and develop. And for infrastructure, we wanted to make sure that Stylus was feeling production ready. People knew that it wasn't just Rust. It was many other languages that could be built too. We wanted apps that would help in the Stylus developer workflow. So some of these examples, thank you for Wake Up Labs for hosting us all here. But of course, one of the big ones that you guys had built out is the AssemblyScript SDK, showcasing that Stylus isn't just for Rust. It's for other languages too, and many of the benefits that we want to expose out of Stylus can't only be achieved in Rust. We'll get to it later, but one of the big ones is like code size. Code size has been a big problem in Rust, but with assembly script, not so much of a problem. So investing in these types of things really gives us a broad lever to expand what's possible and understand what else we can do with Stylus as well. We also have co-builders. They built a caching manager, and they're also working on an activation module. Those are things that are very unique to the Stylus lifecycle that ideally, people that are developing don't have to worry about if they can just go to their site, set up a notification so that your contracts never expire, or at least you're not surprised when they expire. And then we have Rather Labs, who's doing even more complex stuff by creating a move to Stylus compiler for the SWE ecosystem. So ideally, you're going to be able to plug in a SWE move contract. It's going to compile and spit out a Stylus WASM binary that you can deploy right away. So this is really just experimenting with all the possibilities of where Stylus can be applied and taking full advantage of WASM as a whole. And then now I'm going to get into a little bit of learning. So that was all the investment areas. And I was mentioning that it's never as simple as it sounds. So these are some of the things that we learned pretty quickly as what problems people had and experiencing right away. So number one, contract size limits. 24 kilobytes is very small. We heard from many developers they were spending 90% of their time optimizing code for code size rather than writing logic. That really sucks. No one should have to spend that much time in their development just doing one optimization versus really focusing on what's important is more of the business logic. We also heard for earlier on in the year, we didn't have a lot of functionality and tooling built into our SDK. So testing was very hard. Deployment was hard. Multi-contract workflows were a complete mystery at one point. So now as these teams develop and we have evolved our .10 SDK coming out, all of these problems are starting to get solved, and hopefully you guys are going to be able to try it out very soon. But all of that also came with a very sparse ecosystem. If we had held this talk probably last year, I would expect maybe 5 people, maybe less, to come. So we've come a long way in terms of just getting the name out there and getting people involved, and also just getting just general interest of people to build with. And then I don't think you guys can see the colors as well on the screen there, but we have started to solve a lot of these problems. So we now have on the Nitro roadmap as part of OCL, we're going to be increasing the contract size limit to 96 kilobytes for Stylus. That's going to give you a lot more space to work with, and hopefully more time to spend actually building your applications than worrying about code size. We're expecting that probably in an ArboS 60 upgrade. ArboS 50 is in the works right now. So coming up next, probably around Q1. For functionality and tooling, as I was mentioning, all of that is in the .10 SDK in the beta that you can try out now. And by December 15th, we're hoping to wrap up the full audit. So that'll become the latest stable release very shortly. And all the problems you guys were experiencing, hopefully when new developers go download the SDK, won't be a problem anymore. And of course, for the sparse ecosystem, we've been investing a lot in builder meetups, hacker houses, hackathons, and just trying our best to get the community to meet up more and get invested together. So those were some of the technical problems, but it didn't stop there. There's a lot of operational problems we faced this year too. When we signed the contracts with a lot of you guys for the Stylus Sprint, it was in ARB. Probably, in retrospect, a very big mistake. But nonetheless, we started at $1 and it dropped around 30 cents. And so a lot of teams, of course, faced a lot of issues with delivering their milestones because you have literally a third of the budget that you thought you might have. And so we spent a lot of time going back and forth and making sure we were able to offer audit subsidies, different ways to claw back some money, find other places to give you guys money. But we understand there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of effort that went into it, and we did want to make sure you guys got fairly compensated. So hopefully everyone's happy with where they are now, but it was definitely not an easy transition to go through as everyone saw what they thought they were going to get go down significantly as they started to build. The next one was giving good feedback. We've taken on about, as I was saying, 25 to 30 teams when we were first starting. Each of those teams probably had between 5 and 10 milestones each. And so we were literally asked to review hundreds of milestones. And while we could do that, it was a tough time giving like good feedback. And without good feedback, we're not really going to be building anything useful. So we managed to get more technical reviewers, more people that were actually looking at these milestones, and hopefully you guys saw probably midway through the process a little bit better feedback cycles, feedback loops, and getting your milestones reviewed and paid out faster as well. And then the last one is our limited resources. So the Stylus team, very small team, a handful of engineers work on Stylus at OCL. They're incredibly dedicated, but they're also really, really busy. So they haven't had a ton of time to interact with all of you guys, but that's because they've really been heads down, putting in a ton of work into improving the Stylus SDK experience overall. And so as I was kind of talking about, we hopefully fixed a little bit of the ARB prices. We added more technical people. We carved out some dedicated time on the roadmap to just spend on reviewing milestones for you guys. So when it came to delivering very technical milestones like the walnut debugger, those are things that the engineering team actually did spend quite a bit of time looking at deeply and making sure it was good. And right now we're planning on integrating some of that directly into our tooling. We have an audit plan to get some of that into our Stylus SDK over the next month. So we've been making headwinds on all the operational problems as well. And that leads us into improving and kind of talking about how the Stylus experience overall has improved over the past year. And I think the best way to do that is kind of just looking at the different stages of the developer experience and talking through which teams have been really impactful at each of these stages in improving it. So firstly, we're going to talk a little bit about discovery, like how do people find out what Stylus is, and how do they even get started. Learning, as I was talking about, where do they get the foundational resources to get started? And then as they start to build, what kind of templates do we offer them? What kind of support do they have? Testing has been a big concern where, previously we've had a lack of tooling. And then lastly, getting deployed and maintaining those contracts, as you launch them. So firstly, discovering. Developers didn't quite understand, when and where to use Stylus. WASM on EVM was unfamiliar. Many people, because of the previous ecosystems, didn't assume that they had interoperability. This had to be something we had to explain over and over. It was hard to, because of the few number of apps, it was hard to find concrete examples of Stylus apps out there. So it wasn't very easy to figure out why and when someone should be using Stylus, especially because we didn't have a lot of case studies, we didn't have benchmarks and references. So over the past year, we spent quite a bit of time partnering deeply with a lot of the Stylus teams. We built out 8 different case studies. We've rebuilt the core documentation to focus a lot more on what is Stylus, why Stylus, and make it more easier for newcomers to understand as possible. We also grew the Telegram group for the Arbitrum Stylus group from about 100 to 500 with a ton of marketing community activities and activations happening there. And then that's just kind of a screenshot of showcasing how we're working with all these teams to not only get their technology delivered as far as the sprint goes, but actually give them a spotlight in the market and actively work on pushing them towards the other people that are interested in Arbitrum. And then next up is understanding the learning stage. So at the learning stage, it was pretty much just our docs that we had, and we know that we needed more. There was a lot of complexity, and people were constantly asking, like, am I doing this right? And so we wanted to set up a lot more guardrails for those people to make sure that they understood what was happening. So a big push here was these educational programs to teach developers how to use Stylus effectively, and eventually expanding resources like the Wizard IDE, Stylus Saturdays that Alex has been putting out has a ton of useful content about his learnings as well as learnings from interviews he does with other developers in the ecosystem. So all of that tribal knowledge doesn't just stay within people's heads, but like other people can access it, and we're growing and learning as a community. And this one is a fun one that Open Zeppelin put out, but it's just another way to really showcase what Stylus is good at in a fun way and make people understand that there is a lot of use cases where Stylus is going to give you not just a little bit of gains, but 18x worth of gains. And now the build process. Obviously one of the hardest parts. Here we heard there was a lack of patterns, templates, examples, and it was very much like figure it out yourself and hopefully you arrive at the right architecture. So we wanted to provide more building blocks in place, and we wanted to make sure that the workflows between different use cases that people were doing had a place and were easy to achieve. And so some examples here were, of course, working with OpenZeppelin to build out their template library, Third Web, as I talked about. And probably the biggest unlock here that's about to come to more mainstream adoption is the ArboS Foundry integration. So one of the most common problems is if you're working with Solidity and Stylus, these two things are very hard to work together because you need you're not going to get any of your Foundry tools on Stylus. Up until now, with these guys, they forked Foundry, they added in all of the Stylus execution modules that are there, and so now you are able to use all of Foundry tooling with Stylus using that fork of Foundry. And we think that's going to be a huge step forward in helping developers that don't necessarily need to build with Stylus, but simply just want to use Stylus as part of their program to be able to do so. And of course, with the .10 SDK out, we're introducing a ton of major improvements like multi-contract workflows, new testing libraries, workspace support, and very exciting, the ability to import Stylus contracts as crates. So you don't have to worry about writing out ABIs as strings and working with a lot of complexity, but rather just being able to plug into what others have already built. And so this is just an example of someone pulling in a ERC20 crate as a contract here, and this is something that you can now do in the .10 SDK. And the last bit is getting into testing. So initially, at the start of the year, we didn't have a native testing framework. So this was very much to your own device. You might have used the one from OpenZeppelin called Matsu. You might have not seen that at all and built your own testing framework. There was a lot of variation here. So the one thing we wanted to prioritize was kind of giving everyone a base common testing ground. One of our top engineers put in a lot of work into making sure that the native testing framework was compatible with anything you would want to build on top and giving you that base functionality. And along with that, we improved a lot of the workflows that go into testing. So with the ArboS Foundry guys, getting your CI/CD pipelines to work alongside your Solidity proxies and everything else, all of those were things that we considered when improving the testing experience. And of course, the last bit was like the walnut debugging stuff that I already talked to. We also have transaction simulation that initially didn't work with Stylus, but now several RPC providers and simulation providers like Tenderly, Alchemy, etc. Now you can trace transactions and get more data and have a similar experience to a production environment as you would expect out of other EVM. And this is just a quick random screenshot of the ArboS Foundry repo. They haven't fully launched yet, so we don't have marketing material for them. But just to show you guys, they've been putting in a ton of work to make this equivalent. And once they go live, I encourage everyone to go check it out. And the last bit was deployment. So deployment was very limited to Cargo Stylus. So Cargo Stylus was our CLI tool. And it did a lot of functionality, but it was a bit hard to integrate into CI/CD workflows because you had to work with like the CLI binary rather than being able to have direct like Rust libraries to plug into. So we put in a ton of work into getting all of the Cargo Stylus functionality into the Stylus SDK, so you now have programmatic access to be able to do deployments and other things that you would get out of Cargo Stylus, but now you can do it programmatically, which helps you integrate it into many more different testing workflows and deployment workflows. And one thing that we know that's been really lacking in the Stylus ecosystem has been contract verification. I believe there's only about 5 or 6 contracts that are actually verified on Stylus. That's due to a lot of reasons, but number one is that the way that we verified contracts before relied on a very specific GitHub repository structure, and it would only really work with single contracts. So for many reasons, any complex project wouldn't really go through the headache of trying to verify this, and they just skip this step altogether. But with the .10 release, we did a ton of work into making sure that multi-contract workflows were possible, and the verification alongside them will work. And over the next month or so, we're going to be working with all the block explorers to make sure that they also have access to this tooling. So when you guys go publish your contracts, you should have much easier access to verifying more complex projects and contracts. And this is just a quick screenshot of showing the Stylus tools, the Cargo Stylus CLI being programmatically called, and a few things that you can do with it. Now, okay, there's like 10 million Rust developers, right? So we should really target bringing in more developers. But I think in retrospect, we're seeing like maybe volume isn't the right thing to be striving for as like the meaning of success. Maybe it's not the number of developers that we want, but rather the usage on Stylus contracts that's actually more important. So we're saying here that maybe Stylus adoption and counting it just by number of apps or number of deploys, number of developers, is not the goal. And everyone having to learn and build with Stylus for Stylus to be successful, also probably not the goal. What we want to focus really on is making Stylus something that anyone can plug into without necessarily needing to know or write Stylus themselves. So we very much see a future where we have a couple of modules that are popular, that are used, and they don't need to be well understood. If they're audited and they work, people will just plug them into their contracts, into their regular Solidity contracts, and with ArboS Foundry, these things can go integrate into apps that previously never even considered Stylus. So that's really the direction that we think we're going to go headed into the future, is more modularity rather than focusing just on volume. And there's a couple of ways we're thinking about doing this. A lot of this is still very much early, and we're talking with the DAO, the AF, and figuring out how we're going to put all of this into action. But very simply, it's things like being able to work with existing dApps that have problems already. So instead of creating your own app, we think there's actually a ton of existing EVM apps that have problems that can be solved with Stylus, but people just aren't looking into it. For a plethora of reasons, mostly being that no one has Rust engineers kind of readily available on their team to be able to dissect and understand that this is exactly where Stylus is going to be better. So we think with the community that we've built up so far, you guys are more than talented enough to understand that, yeah, there are plenty of Solidity contracts that have these issues, and you can probably analyze and find them. And if you build a POC and present it to them, especially with the help of Arbitrum and OCL to get in front of these people, we think that they would probably be very much willing to integrate Stylus if it was an easy ask for them to do so. And then obviously if you can get one person to integrate, you can get more people to integrate, and over time generalize these modules that can be used by more dApps. So a very simple example of this is over a couple of weeks ago, we had GMX have a giant, or cause a giant spike in gas on Arbitrum a couple weeks. And we know that a lot of that was caused by series of liquidations that were happening. And if you were looking into the liquidation code, a lot of that is compute intensive. So someone threw out an idea of hey, why don't we try to replace that liquidation code with a Stylus module, and could that potentially save GMX a lot of gas? Could we have possibly prevented as large of a spike if they had been using Stylus, right? And that's kind of an example of, if we can get Stylus integrated into these mainstream apps where it is really good, that's what we think can actually grow Stylus and get more people into it, versus trying to build up net new applications alone. And that's pretty much it. So last call out here is from Alex, who's lost his voice a little bit. So I'm going to be making a quick shout out for him. He's been a tremendous part of the ecosystem and been doing a ton of work with Stylus Saturdays, talking to you guys, getting feedback. And so the next stage of this is really, he's working on spinning up a Stylus Developers Guild alongside the rest of us as well. And this is going to be some support that we're going to, from OCL as well, put a lot of time into. So we highly encourage everyone to go join. All you got to do is go to the GitHub repo and go sign up. And we are also working on a Stylus upsite, which is going to be kind of the central source of community projects, learning resources, kind of a hub that's outside of the documentation. So if Arbitrum docs are going to be very specific about the SDKs, this is the place where we're going to start advertising all of the other tools that you guys are building and all of the kind of context around when to use those tools as well. So these are some of the projects in the works, and we highly encourage everyone here to come and join and help us out as we build out 2026. And that's it. Yeah, thank you.